And with no further ado, Eldrena, would you mind
Yes.
taking it away?
Yes. Let me see. Let me share my screen here.
Yeah, I'll stop my share there.
Okay. Now, how do I click on it without can you see the top part?
Yes.
Okay. So how do I get rid of that thing?
If you'll click your little tiny button at the bottom that looks like a sail, Eldrena, that should probably take you to a presentation mode.
Okay.
Yeah, to the far right of your notes.
Okay.
Oh, a little too far. There we are.
Yay. Okay. Well, let me see. This is something that I want to share with you. It's something I've been thinking about for a very long time. And Emily, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this Heritage Month. I was thinking about when I first talked to Emily several weeks ago. I was trying to think in my mind, what is it that has been in the back of my head. For this year, I have had this thought about people coming to me and asking me about Native American people. And some of the questions were had me thinking about the fact that there's a lot of people that do not know a lot about the North American continent and all of the indigenous people that are living in it today and that were living in it thousands of years ago. And some of them, some of the questions that they asked me almost sounds like they didn't even realize that the Native American people, American Indians, indigenous ones, whatever title you want to give it, they don't exist anymore. And I thought that was kind of odd because I thought, well, I wonder what it is that allows them to think that way. So as I go through my presentation, if you guys have some thoughts or questions in your mind that you might want to ask me, I don't know if I have that, if I can answer it, but write them down so that we can kind of talk about it at the very end, because we're going to have plenty of time to have question and answers. And in between this presentation, I'm going to be sharing with you different stories that come along with the information I'm going to be sharing with you. And so the title that I came up with is They Walked Here Before Me. One of the things that I have always grown up with is the knowledge that my ancestors were all around, whether they were walking right next to me, and I was part of the 7 generations, and some of our older ones are now passing away. A lot of them are dying. And with them, they're taking the traditions, the culture, the knowledge with them. And it's hard for me to see it because I live away from the rest of my tribe. I'm living right now in the Amarillo area. I'm probably about 4.5 hours from going back to my people, but because of COVID, I haven't been back there since March, I guess. And so I'm constantly thinking and asking myself, who walked before me? And when I travel all over, I always think to myself, who were the ones that were here long time ago? And I think you guys had a clip on Instagram about me being by the Paladero Canyon. And there are many stories about the Kiowas, Comanches, Apaches, Arapahoes, and all of the great animals that were once there, the wolf that you don't have down there anymore. And so not just people, but animals. And so in all of that, it is a celebration of story. And so let's kind of start it off with some of the questions that I have been asked over the years. Are you Indian? Can you speak other tribes' language? If you're Indian, why are you not wearing a buckskin dress, beaded moccasins, and a feather in your hair? Where did your people come from? Do you live in a teepee? Did they force you to go to school and wear civilized clothes? Do your tribes have powwows? I thought Indians were no more. How many tribes are there? And so I'm going to go through here and address some of these questions and the best I can. And with them will come some stories that also will go along with these questions. And so the question about, are you Indian? Can you speak other tribes' language? Oops. This is a very sensitive thing here. And so it's kind of like identity, discovering who I am, knowing who I am. Ever since I was a little girl, that is something that is always taught. We don't even think twice about it. From the time that we can understand, we are told about ourselves. So my English name is Eldrena. My Indian name, my Tewa name is Kulutsawe. It means blue corn. Now, I want you to think about your name. I want you to think about the name that you were given. The first, middle, last. Maybe you just have a first and middle or a first and last, just like I did growing up. I didn't get teased like everybody else did. But my English name is Eldrena, and it's very unusual. You don't hear it very often. And I asked my mom one time, I said, how did you ever come up with the name Eldrena? And she said, well, when I was going to school at high school in Winslow, Arizona, there was a young girl there that she was just a kind girl. And I heard her name and I thought, that is a really nice name. I don't ever know of anybody else that has that name. So she said, I just kind of put it in the back of my head thinking that maybe one day when I have a family, if I have a girl, I'm going to name her Eldrena. Well, my mother had 3 boys and they were getting ready to give it all up. And, but they tried one more time and here I came. And so I kind of go along in my head. I thought, well, the Tewa name blue corn fits me. Because when you plant your corn in the ground, a lot of times the yellow, the white, those tend to come up pretty easy. But the blue corn doesn't come up all the time. It's very hard. You have to really work at it, and there's going to be times that when you plant it, it's just not going to come up. And if it does, everybody wants it. It's a very nutritious type of corn, and we make all kinds of foods with it. And so that's kind of who I am. Now, I come from the Coic people. The Spaniards gave us the name Laguna, and I come from the village of Guich, and that word means hand it to me. The mother village of Laguna had many people in it, and there was several families from that village that decided to go to the north about 15 miles. They had already known of the land that was there. It was owned at that time by a Spanish name by the name of Poati. And they talked to him and discussed what they had to do in order to purchase some of that land up there. And of course, they didn't have a lot of money, so they purchased that land with livestock. And they put the information, almost like a contract type of thing, on a skin, rolled it up, and the families just hung on to it. And my aunts and my uncle and my mom and them, they always passed the story down because our family was a part of that group. And they said that they would kind of hand that rolled up skin to each family to take care of. Unfortunately, because no one was paying attention to it and a lot of the younger ones were going off to school, no one paid attention to who was the last one that had that skin. So as of today, we don't know what happened to it. And so the people there gathered their things together. The families gathered everything they had, and they started to move to the north of the village, the mother village of ODIIP. And so as they were going up and over the mesas, they were constantly helping one another, holding things up for the ones on top to get. And then when they were coming down, they were holding their hands up to help. And so that word means hand it to me. Guish means hand it to me. So then when they came to the village, to the land that they had bought, they decided that that name was going to be Guish. And so that is what it is referred to. Laguna has 6 villages within itself, and Guish is one of them. And on the map, they just keep the name Powari since it was purchased from this Spanish man. And so from my mother's side then, I come from the Sharshko Hanutsa, the Roadrunner clan. And then on my father's side, I am from the Corn clan. And in Tewa, you say Kulu, Kulu. And so that is the tribe that I come from. So in Laguna, it would kind of be like both Tewa and Laguna put together, Kulu Hanutsa. And so that's my clan on my father's side. Hanu means people. And all 3 of the tribes that I am a part of, which is Goek, Tewa, and Hopi, they are all a matriarchal group. So everything pretty much belongs to the woman. The house, the family, everything, the land, it belongs to the woman. But it's not to be disrespectful to the man, because we are always taught that just because the woman owns a lot of the things that the men are very important in our lives, they are placed as leaders of our village and our tribe. And so, you know, they are very important. They take care of the fields, the animals, the structures. There's a lot of things that they have to do. So we as women, my elders have always said to always be respectful to one another, because we work together. We don't work against each other. And so growing up as a young girl, you know, you just kind of want to be a rebel sometimes. And so I kind of, I'm sure I had my mom shake her head a couple of times at some of the things that I would say, because of the era that she grew up in, the era of doing everything for the male and for the man. And so when I would see that being done at our house, especially after she had remarried, it was harder for me to kind of hold my tongue sometimes. So, but I have learned since then. I'm a whole lot nicer. But my parents then, you know, being that one is from the Roadrunner clan and the other is from the Corn clan, each one of those clans has a place in the tribe that they are in charge of. So a lot of tribes throughout America, especially, I don't know too much about the Canadian tribes or the tribes of Mexico, but here in the United States, in visiting with many of my friends that I have met from many tribes, they also have clans too. When I first came to Amarillo, I was very homesick. And I kept thinking to myself, I wonder if Amarillo has any Native people here. And so everywhere I went, I really watched everybody. I looked carefully. And then when I thought I saw when I would approach them and say, you know, are you from a tribe here in the United States? And they'd say, yes. How did you know? Well, we kind of just know. And so every time I would meet somebody, I would write their name down and put what tribes they came from and where they live and a phone number if they'd allow me to have it. And then finally, I met up with a woman here who was a teacher and an art teacher, and her husband was an art teacher at the community college. And I had befriended her. She was from the Oto, Pawnee, and Potawatomi people. And so I had told her what I was doing. And so I handed over the list of the people I had gathered. And then we started calling them. And all together, we came together. And we were able to visit with one another, get to share stories from what tribe they came from, what type of things those tribes did. Some of them knew the songs, the language, and they would share that with us. And it was wonderful. And sometimes we would all come together and share the types of foods that every tribe that we were from, that was the food that they normally would eat. And so it was wonderful. One of the things that we had in common was we loved music, we loved food, and we loved to laugh. And so we enjoyed each other because of that. Many of the old ones are gone now, and I have found myself to become one of the elders. As a matter of fact, today I was just talking to another person that lives here. He comes from the NAHM people. And so he was just checking up on me just to see how I was doing. And so throughout the United States, I can't say about other tribes, but I do know that the Pueblo people are hospitable and kind. And, you know, we like to share with other people. And so let me see here. Okay, now, one of the questions, if you're Indian, why are you not wearing a buckskin dress, beaded moccasins, and a feather in your hair? Well, that is not the type of tribe that I come from. And so it's a matter of educating them, allowing them to know a little bit about the different tribes throughout the country. I'll hit on that at the very kind of towards the end to give you some more information on it. But the pictures that you see there, I'm in a classroom teaching some little ones, and the moccasins that I have on are not beaded. That's one of our later traditional moccasins that we wear. It's kind of like a boot type of moccasin. The ones that you see in the pictures of the older woman and of the young girls, they are made out of deer hide. They're white buckskin. And all of these are made by hand. And whenever we are in need of some more moccasins or in any way, we go to one of the men. We have several men back at our villages that make moccasins throughout the pueblos to the north. The men there, they make moccasins also, but if you want something very exclusive to your pueblo, it's good to just go and find somebody there that makes them. My moccasins have been made by a relative of mine ever since I started telling stories. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry that I keep coming to you to get them replaced. I said, but I'm not wearing them out by dancing. I'm wearing them out by traveling all over the country. And he would just laugh and he'd say, well, at least you're making good use out of them. And so I think he's made me about 5 pairs now that I have worn out just from the time that I've been telling stories and traveling the country. And so the clothing that you see the girls wearing right there, the black dress is traditionally, it was woven by the men. The men were the weavers. They would weave the dresses and the belts. They would make the moccasins, and they would also make the jewelry. The women, the cloth dresses that you see right there came later on. They came as the Europeans started to travel, and the native people were trading with one another and trading with other groups that were passing through. Whenever they found cloth, then they became very creative with it. And the dresses that you see, we call them the underdresses. They're the ones that are under the black dress. The black dress we call a manta. And the underdress is kind of exclusively among the Pueblo people. So when you go to New Mexico or Arizona, Arizona has the Hopi land with the Tewa and Hopi there. Their clothing will be made similar to the ones in New Mexico. And then the aprons, those came later on because when some of the women started to take classes in sewing, one of the things that they started learning was, of course, how to sew dresses, but also how to make aprons, how to use a machine, how to sew with your hands and things like this. And so because of that, it's kind of like, you could just have a plain apron, or you could have an apron with art. And so you can see where the woman at the older woman there, Miss Aragon, she has a plain apron. And right now that's kind of her clothing that she would normally wear every day. So she's not going to wear her fancy underdress or her fancy apron or anything because she has to work. But that's how the women dressed not too long ago. I mean, my great-grandmother, Napai, that's the dress that she wore every single day. That's how she would dress. And the young girls that you see are, they just finished dancing a traditional dance that we call Follow the Leader. And so they were just finishing up their day. So they're all still dressed. Now, when they come off of the dance plaza, then they put on the apron. When you're dancing, you take the apron off. When you're finished dancing and you're going to your house to rest or to eat, you put that apron on. It's just kind of a distinction of what's going on in your world at that time. And over here, where did your people come from? Where, or do you live in a teepee? Here are some pictures of Laguna up here. Gosh, I don't know what year this picture was taken, but I really like it up the far corner there. You can still see where our water is running. It's clear. There's not all the foliage that came in, all the weeds that were brought in when people started to move into the lands, and roadways started to take place, and the railroad. All of those things brought plants that were not indigenous to the area. Plus, they had a lot of livestock that roamed around to keep everything cut down. And so today, Laguna is over here, and you can see all of the weeds now. It's not as green as it can be because the rains, weren't falling at that time. And then down in the other corner is where my father's people live. This is a mesa, and you can see the houses up on top. Before electricity came in and cars, people used trails to get from the top to the bottom and vice versa. And the only village on top of this mesa is, this is first mesa that I took a picture of, and it has 3 villages on top. The first village you come to when you're driving up to it is the village I come from, the Hano village, the Tewa village. And then the next one is called Shichomovi, it's the middle village. And then the last one that you cannot drive to is one of the oldest inhabited villages in the United States, and it's called Walpi. And Walpi, the people there have chosen not to go modern as much, well, as kind of want to stay away from it as much as they can. There are some things that they will bring into their houses, but they don't want to get used to it. So electricity is something they don't have there. Running water, they don't have there. They still use the outhouses. And if they want water, they will either go to the water tank that's right there at First Mesa, fill up their tanks and take it back, drive it back to their houses there. And some of them are allowed to park their vehicles at their village, but not very many because it's not wide. And so there's not a lot of room for vehicles to be there. That's the village that my grandfather came from. His name was Lesuvi. Or actually Douglas Douma. He was Hopi, and then my Saya's father was Lesuvi, and they came from that village of Walpi. And so I have relatives there. My father used to take me to that village, and we lived down below that mesa, and that village down below the mesa is called Polaka. And my Saya, my grandmother, that means grandmother in the Tewa language, my Saya lived down below with her family. Her family was one of the first ones that moved from the top of the mesa to the bottom. They lived on top of the mesa because it protected them from raiding tribes. The Ute, the Paiute, the Apache, the Dene, the Navajo, a lot of them were raiding, and they were nomadic, and they just moved around a lot. And so that is how the Tewa people, their story about themselves has to do with that. At one time, my Saya said that the Hopis lived at Walpi, and then there were other villages that they lived at. But this village at First Mesa is the only one that took time, several times, to send runners to the east. And they were seeking the Tewa warriors because they knew that they had already gone against a great power. And that power was the country of Spain. And they had defeated the soldiers that came from Spain. And so they knew how to fight, because Hopi people are peaceful people. They don't react to fighting as quickly as other tribes might. And there are some Pueblo people, other tribes that are just like that. The Tewas, they really will not fight unless they're provoked. They have the ability to fight. They're great warriors, but that's not the first thing that they want to jump to. They want peace before fighting. But if they have to fight and protect, then they have the skills to do it. So the Hopis knew that, and they sent runners to their chief to ask them if they could come and live among them to protect them. Well, it took about 4 tries, my Saya said, and then finally a group decided to head west. And as they were traveling the country, it took months for them to get from the New Mexico, Rio Grande area to the lands of the Hopi, which are kind of in a deserted area, about an hour north of Holbrook, Arizona, an hour north of Winslow, Arizona. And so, of course, there were no roads at the time, but the runners, they told them how to go. And a lot of the times, the tribes knew of each other already. They already knew, because a lot of times they had to run to give messages to each other. So they already knew the routes of how to get to the different places that surrounded their area. And so when the Tewas finally made their way back to Hopi land, they took care of business. They fought whenever the tribes would come, and they let it be known that they were going to be living there now and they would be protecting the Hopis. And so when that took place, the Hopis at First Mesa, one of the things that was spoken was said that if you do this for us, we will give you some land. We will give you land here on top of the mesa to live and build your houses, but we'll also give you land down below so that you can grow crops. And so Saya said that was how we Tewas came to live among the Hopis in Arizona, because traditionally we come from New Mexico. They still speak the language of the Tewa that they spoke when they were living in the New Mexico area. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit purer, I think, because a lot of the Tewas in New Mexico had to live among other people like the Spaniards and the English and all that. So sometimes they absorbed some of the wording and the accents and everything from the people that were around them. And so the Tewas were not so much, didn't have to deal with it so much. Another thing I'm gonna let you think about this story. My Saya, she said, Drina, when you go up on top of the mesa, over there by the water tower, have you ever noticed some rocks stacked on top of each other? And I said, yes. And she says, well, I'm going to tell you this. Don't ever go up there and bother it, okay? You leave those things alone. And if you're with your friends, you tell them too, don't bother it, you leave it alone. And I said, well, why, Saya? And she said, because that is a marking place. I thought, a marking place? A marking place for what? She said, when we Tewas, when we did what we said we were going to do with the tribes that were attacking, the Hopis started to mistreat us. And it was as if they were not going to live up to what they spoke to us, like what they were going to do for us if we did what we said we would do. And they did not treat us very kindly. They did not give us food right away because we didn't have time to plant. So we were going to be relying on them to help nourish us until we can start learning the land and learning how to plant, and the men would learn how to hunt because it was in an area that was new to them. And so because of this, the Tewas were not being treated very well. And they had gathered themselves together and they said, well, you know, maybe we should pack up what we have and just move on. And the Hopis found out about it, and they thought, if they move on, what if those tribes come back again and start attacking? So they came together for a meeting, and they met in the middle village. At that time, they had not intermarried yet, so that village was empty. The Walpi people were on the south side, and the Tewa were on the north. And they came together in the middle. And they talked about what was going to happen. And the Hopis convinced the Tewas to stay, don't go. We need you here to watch over us. And so the Tewas agreed, but they agreed only if the Hopis would do something. And so the Hopis said, okay, tell us what we need to do. The Tewas, Saya said, they had put a hole down already into the dirt and into that rock. And they told the Hopis to spit inside of it. And they did. And so the Tewas spit on top and they covered it up. And I said to my Saya, spit? How come they would spit? And she said, because that was the language. I said, what do you mean? You see, when the Hopi spit, they put their language in there, and the Tewa spit on top, and they covered it up. And from that point on, they told the Hopis, even though we live side by side, you will not learn our language. We will learn your language, but you will never learn our language and our ways. And so those rocks, they are the markers of the place that it took place. And I thought to myself, well, that just doesn't make sense. You know how you go in life and your adults and your grandparents tell you something and you think, well, that just doesn't make sense. And so I decided I was going to start researching this. I didn't know I was going to, that was going to be part of what I do in life. And so I asked my uncle, who was Hopi, and he was married to my aunt, which is Tewa Hopi. And I asked another uncle that was Hopi, that was married to a Tewa. And I said, you have been living with my aunties for all these years. You have not learned the language of Tewa? And they said, no. I said, how can you not learn? You're right next to them. People come to visit. They come and go. How is it that you are not knowing these things? And they said, because Drina, have you not noticed that whenever a Hopi comes into the home of a Tewa, what happens? They change and they start speaking Hopi. And he said, yes. And when they leave, what do they speak? Tewa. Said, yes. That's one way that they protect their language. When a Hopi comes in, everybody speaks Hopi. When the Hopi leaves, everybody speaks Tewa. And then our boys, if they have a Hopi mother, then they go to the kiva of the Hopi mother. If they have a Tewa mother, then they go to the kiva of the Tewa mother, and they take part in the ceremonies. And so if any of them, male or female, go to the Tewas and they take part there, everything they learn stays there. They're not to share it with others, not to even share it with their mom and dad that are Hopi. They don't know. And that's another way they protect. I said, oh, so after a while I realized, wow, you know, that I don't know how it is today, but when I was growing up, that story was very powerful. And so the Tewas coming from the Rio Grande, they left behind their tribes, their tribal family, a lot of things they were used to, but they got used to where they're going now as they're with the Hopi people. Did they force you to go to school and wear civilized clothes? For me, no. But for my Saya and many others before them, yes. My Saya told me many times that when they took her to the boarding school, it wasn't as far away as some of the kids throughout the United States. It wasn't as far as they had to go, but it wasn't walking distance either. So where she had to go to school, they could not come home during the day. They had to stay there. And they had uncles that would get on their burros and take the burros early in the morning before the sun would rise up. And they would take those burros to a place called Keams Canyon. And so they would check up on the children. My Saya tried to escape many times, and she was captured each time and taken back to the school. And one of her uncles found her on a trail when he was coming to check up on them, and she tried to hide from him. She said she didn't know who he was. She thought maybe it was somebody that was going to get her and take her back to school. And he had already seen her hide, and he told her, come out, whoever you are. You know, I already see you, come on out. And it was her. And he said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm trying to make my way home. And he said, why? And she said, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to go to school here. He said, why don't you want to go to school here? This is where they're going to teach you. They're going to teach you things that, that we don't have any knowledge about. We don't know how to read. We don't know how to write. We don't know the things of the Bahana people. We don't know the things of the white man. And so they're going to teach you. And she said, but they're mean. They yell at you. They hit you. They don't talk nice to us children. And so from that point on, she said that her uncle put her on his burro, took her back to the boarding school, and he talked to the teachers and he talked to the administration. And finally, they said to my Saya that if she would accomplish staying there and finishing up a certain grade level, that she would no longer have to attend school. She could go on home and help out with the family and everything. So because of that, that was the only way that it kept her at the boarding schools. Now, some of these kids here, like you see some that are dressed in their traditional clothes, their families, the United States government was very good at marketing why they should send their children to school. And some of them didn't really care if they cared why they went to school. They would gather them up and pull them away from their mothers and grandmas crying. And their adults really thought that they were going to go and take care of their children just like they took care of their children. They loved their children. They cherished their children. The little kids were our future. And so you talk to them right. You care for them. You start teaching them how to be good leaders and good people from the time they're little. You don't put negative, harsh things in them. And so the world that they were going into is going to be very different. And so some of the stories that came out of boarding school days, I think on your book reference sheet, I think I have noted several of the books there that were written from people that attended boarding school. You can, if you have time, you can look through those. And so, yes, for some of the older ones, they did have to, they took their clothes away and they put on clothes that were very uncomfortable. They were used to wearing moccasins and now they had to wear stiff leather shoes, clothing that was tight and hot. And their hair, that was another thing, is that a lot of tribes, I don't remember it being among the Pueblo people, but a lot of the Plains tribes, when you cut their hair, you're telling them that somebody died. So imagine these little kids trekking across the country from the Dakotas, from the Pacific Northwest, all the way to Pennsylvania, whether it was on train or with a wagon, all that way. You're not going to see them. You're not going to see them for a long time. And some of them died at the boarding schools. Some of them never made it back home. And the ones that did make it back home, the family that they once knew were no longer there. And then when they got to this place and they were cleaning them all up, they were scrubbing them down, and then they went and they cut both the girls' and the boys' hair. The children cried and they wept because they thought that somebody died in their family. That was the only reason why they ever cut their hair, was when somebody died, you cut your hair. And so they didn't know what was going on. And of course, the people that were taking them, they didn't all know historically what the kids were all about and where they were coming from, their background. So they didn't know that they needed to console them. Instead, they got punished. And so there's a lot of stories that the older ones talk about. Today we have boarding schools, but they're not the same. They're very regulated, and a lot of the times kids want to go to them because of the education that is offered to them today and the opportunities that come from going to a boarding school. The ones that I know of right now are in Santa Fe, Anadarko. There's some more that I can't think of right now, but those are the two that kind of are in my brain. How do your tribes have powwows? Traditionally, no, but we have ceremonies that take place at our villages. And some of these dances can be seen by non-native people, especially during our feast days. We always welcome everybody on our feast days to come and enjoy the dances, the vendors, the food, and everybody can attend those things, both non-natives and native from other tribes. But then we also have very strict traditional dances and ceremonies that take place that non-natives are not allowed to come. And if you ever go to the pueblos, they will have a sign as you enter into the village. On the roads, they'll have a sign that says, if you're non-native, do not enter. And so they just want you to turn around. So then you know that something is going on traditionally that is only for that group of people. And so even for myself, if I go to some of the Pueblo tribes to the north, if they're going through a certain ceremony, even though I'm Pueblo and I'm native, I can't go there because it's exclusively for their people. And so I'm not allowed to go into their villages at that time. And so today, a lot of tribes from all over, they all take part in powwows. Powwow has just become a generic way that everybody can enjoy one another in dancing. And it's taken on a competition. There are powwows that take place all over Canada, the United States, and they have prize money. The winners can take home thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars, and they just kind of make a powwow circuit. They go from one powwow to the next, to the next, to the next, in hopes that they will be good enough to where by the end of the year, at the end of the powwow trail, they would have enough to where they could live off of. And so that's one of the things that people are doing nowadays. Let me see here. I thought Indians were no more. How many tribes are there? Well, there are 574 federally recognized Indian tribes and Alaskan Native tribes and villages. That's a lot, but there are more that have not been recognized. And the United States government has an application that the tribes have to submit and apply to, and it's looked over, and then it's decided whether or not they are going to be federally recognized or not. And then even though they are federally recognized, that just kind of means that now the tribes are open to have the United States government help them out if it needs to be. There are things set in place that will that they can benefit from, and every tribe has to create their own constitution. The tribe that I come from, we have our own officers, we have our own police force, hospitals, education, and things like that. And so many tribes cannot do that. Some tribes are wealthier than others. Not all tribes decided to have casinos on their land. And so they have to have another source of income to help their tribe exist. And so that's a little bit about that. And also to tell you guys that when I was in high school, I had a very hard time understanding what my educators were trying to teach me in history, English, literature, government. And because a lot of the things they were telling me didn't make sense in the world that I was living in. the things that they were saying, I could not relate to because it wasn't happening in my world. Now, if they would have got to know who we were as a people, and then they could say, okay, well, you know, when you all do this, how does that happen? What do you do when you elect your governor? What takes place? Is there a vote? Okay, well, in the United States, you also have a vote. And so, and then they can talk about the legislature and the government that way and everything. But they didn't know how to relate it to us. And so therefore, it was really hard for me to understand. In some cases, the things that they said kind of contradicted what I had been taught among the Goek and the Tewa and the Hopi oral history. We could go to places where we knew our ancestors once lived. Their houses were built the same as our houses were, with rock and adobe. Their kivas were a lot like our kivas. The pottery that you would see, the shards that you would see laying around the ground, you would look at them and you'd think, oh, I wonder who this potter, who the potter was that made this little piece here that I find. But you never take it with you. You always leave it behind because that's kind of, we're not like archaeologists and stuff. We didn't grow up taking things with us. And so we got to see things firsthand. And we actually, us kids, a lot of times we'd pack a lunch and we would go to the ruins that were close to our villages just to go walk through it and see, you know, how small their houses were and just imagine what life would have been like living there. And even the rooms, you know, some rooms were bigger than others. And so we were able to go and walk through them. In Laguna, my people always talked about Mesa Verde as a place where we came from. And then it wasn't a place that they knew they weren't going to stay for a long time because they were prayerfully asking, where is it that we're going to be living? And so they just had to be patient. And then when the time came, they knew when it was their time to go. And so around Mesa Verde, one of the things that one of my uncles was telling me was that at Mesa Verde, there were many tribes that were up there. There wasn't just one, there were many tribes, and our group was one of them. And so anyway, they have their own stories. Every tribe has their own story of how they came to be on this land. Another thing that I grew up knowing about was a man by the name of Pope. He was from a Pueblo tribe called Oke Awinge. This is a map of long time ago, and there are many pueblos here on this map that are no more. Because when the Spaniards came, they wreaked havoc among the land. And one of the things that they liked to do is they wanted to control everybody. So if there were villages out there, they wanted the people of those villages to leave that village and come to where they wanted them to come. So that way they could kind of keep a closer eye. And so they had a lot of people upset with them. And there was a lot of fighting that went on because they didn't want to leave their village. That was their home. And so we have many stories among the Pueblo people of what happened during that time. But Pope was known as one that went up against the Spanish crown. And it all came to a head because the Pueblo people had allowed the Spaniards, the conquistadors, the missionaries to come into their land, and they didn't mind sharing. They had enough to be shared. But when they got there, those people came with a different attitude. They came with a mindset of ownership, owning the land, owning people, owning stuff. And that wasn't the way of the Pueblo. That wasn't the way of a lot of the tribes among the United States. It's a matter of, it's almost as if the way I see it, after reading books and hearing accounts of the chiefs of long ago and the things that they said, not even among my people, but some of the chiefs of the northern plains and back to the east, it's almost like they all knew where each other lived. They knew which ones were friendly and which ones to stay away from. And they all had their landmarks of how far they could go to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. And it wasn't for ownership. That I don't believe, and this is my own personal thought, I don't believe, based on what I read and have heard people say, it doesn't sound like it was ownership like mine, ours. It was knowing how far you had to take care of. Our land that we take care of goes this far to the east, this far to the west, this far to the north, this far to the south. That's the land that was given to us so that we could take care of it and everything that is on it. It wasn't like that's our land. That's the place that we're given to take care of. They were stewards of the land, not owners of the land. And that is why so many of the Plains chiefs fought, because their ancestors told them, whatever you do, don't sell the land. This land is not to be sold. It's because we need to, we're in charge of it. We are the caretakers of this land. And so they knew the land so well. They knew when the animals were going to be going by, the bison, the big herds, the Westerners looked at the bison as a huge animal that was in the way. And people decided that they could make money off of that bison. And so when the bison roamed in the millions, sadly to say, here in the state of Texas, around Hamlin, Texas, there was a place called, well, it's Rath County. Charles Rath came down from Dodge City along with other men, buffalo hunters and several others, and they kind of put a community get together at one just very quickly, and it served the purpose of killing bison. They got there when the herds were roaming in the numbers, and they killed them. And some of the accounts say that a good buffalo hunter could kill about 100 head of bison in a day with the rifle that he had. Well, I'm thinking in my head, if that's just one buffalo hunter, there is absolutely no way you can skin that animal and use everything that you take from 100 bison if one man's going to do that. And so that is why you would see scattered throughout the plains just dry bones, rotted carcasses. It stunk. You could just imagine how many dead animals that went for miles and miles and miles and miles. And it was a terrible smell. Several tribes that went hunting for bison, that was one of the things that they thought about, that before you even got to where you saw death, you could smell it. And so they used the hides, the tongues were a delicacy, the brain, everything, you know, they would put them all on a cart and ship them to or take them to a railroad station, and then they would take them from there. And then once the bones started to get dry and they were left out in the plains, they would get those up and pulverize them. And they were used in many things throughout the United States. They found a use for that. But today, when you go there, there's just a field and you don't see anything about the city of Rath. There might be a marker there, but that's about it. But when the bison left, it also affected the ecology. the plants that needed the bison to cut them down so that they can grow good, they no longer had that bison. And I believe one of the books that I had put in there, I think it's called Braiding Sweetgrass. That one is a good book to read when it talks about the science. And in there, she's talking about how the saliva of the bison actually helps the grasses. It kind of all works together. And those are the type of things that people did not know, that when you take something away, it can drastically affect something else. And you never know it until time has passed. Well, a lot of the people are bringing back the bison throughout the United States, and they're coming back to the tribes. Many tribes in New Mexico have a lot of bison, so they're making the numbers are growing again. And because they're roaming the plains of the North Plains, the grasses are starting to get better. They're eating up things that used to just grow abundantly, and now they're kind of keeping them down. And also the wolves are coming back. They kind of all go hand in hand, and so they all work together. But with the Pueblo Revolt, you know, it changed a lot of things, the way the people acted and did things. And 12 years later, the Spaniards came back and they had the missions rebuilt that were destroyed. And since that time, they've been living among the Pueblo. And when you go back there in New Mexico, especially in New Mexico, a lot of the Pueblo people have the Spanish last names. You'll see names that are like Montoya, Martinez, Candelaria, Garcia, you know, a lot of the Spaniard names. So you might think that they are, but they're not. They're from the Pueblo people. And so this is what I was taught from family and tribal leaders. Our family and tribe history, our story of who we are as a people and where we came from before we settled in the place that we're at Laguna, was talked about on an annual basis. And that information was always given to the males when they would gather together in their kivas or community halls. And one of the other things that was very important was to honor oneself, was to appreciate what has been given to you, and your purpose, family, land, food, shelter, and language, and the traditions of story and song. Whenever I go home, there's always singing that takes place. The men get together and they talk about how they created a song when they were out doing deer hunting, and then they share it with those, and then they use it for ceremonial dances in the wintertime, or maybe a social dance of one kind. And then constantly taking care of one another. If you see that somebody needs help, go help them, especially if they're the elders, go check up on them, make sure they're okay. If they need anything from the store, do it for them. Don't wait to be asked. I was always taught, don't wait to be asked. If you see a need, get it done. And then our core values, of course, it helps. We teach this to our children from the time that they're little, to love, respect, have compassion, be faithful, understanding, spirituality, the balance of peace, empathy. Those are the values that are taught to us, not just in our homes, but whenever we gather together as a large group of people. Our leaders, they're constantly reminding us about that, especially if they see a lot of chaos going on in the villages, then you know, they'll start to talk a little bit about that. Our government, we are, because we're federally recognized, we're kind of required to have our own government. So we have a tribal government, and we call our leaders governor. So he's like, in some tribes call them chairmen, some call them chiefs, and we call ours governor. So we have a governor and a first lieutenant governor, second lieutenant, head fiscal, second fiscal, and then also we have the secretary, treasurer, And we have to have an interpreter. Even though our governor may speak Laguna fluently and English, we still have to have our interpreter, because that's just a part of who we are. That's he will go ahead and if, like, say for instance, I am not fluent in Laguna, and so if my governor was talking to me in Laguna, then the interpreter, I would just wait for him to tell me what was being spoken. And then I would tell the interpreter my answer, and then he would relay that information to the governor in the Coake language. And so that is why we have our interpreters there. And then every village, we have 6 villages, and every one of them has a representative. So they have weekly village meetings. They discuss what is happening in the village, but they also tell what the mother village is discussing. And if they have to have a vote, they'll bring it to the village and they'll vote on it. And then that councilman will take it to the mother village that same week and say, this is how our village voted. And then they'll gather up all the information from all the other villages and then decide, you know, okay, do we do it or not? If the majority says yes, then we do it. No, we don't do it. So we have our mother tribal council, and then we have our villages, and they all have to work together in order to make decisions. And sometimes it takes a lot for them to get things done. Now, here is just a map really quick of North American tribes. You can see back in about 40,000 years ago, between 40 to 10,000 BC, that there were people already in this continent, all the way up into Alaska, Canada, down into Mexico, across the United States. They were already building civilizations. They were building roads. They had a trading route. They knew what economy was. They were great architects. They were astrologers. They were doctors. There's one I thought that was very interesting. In 10 BC, the researchers discovered that in Alaska, that one of the Aleut groups there, they were already learning how to perform surgery. And I thought, wow. And this information came from a Native American Indian health place. And I think, I want to say that I have that on your reference guide, the very top one. That's the one that you're going to find all this information that I'm showing you right now. I didn't give you any details. I just kind of wanted to show you that there were people already here in the United States and that were in North America. And then this is kind of zeroing in on the United States, some of the things that were already taking place. And I had read way back before I even became a storyteller about the possibility of tribes. I think I just kind of remembered reading it, and all I said was, wow, and then I just went on. But I remembered reading something that talked about the Vikings, that the tribes talked about the Vikings coming, and they already knew about them. And so, you know, there were already people from other places coming to this land long before the rest of the explorers started to happen. But of course, you know, the native people from all across North America, they were the ones that explored this land. They discovered this land. They're the ones that got it ready for those yet to come. They didn't know when they were coming, but they knew they were going to come. Even among many of the tribes that I am a part of, they knew that the people were going to be coming, that the Bahana means like bright light, that they were going to be coming from the east and stuff. So there were already stories across the way that talked about this, that they already knew that there was a group that was going to come. It was just a matter of when. And so here are some things. Some people will ask about Christopher Columbus and, you know, anything. I didn't grow up really knowing about Christopher Columbus. I know that that was one of the things that our teachers talked about, and we thought, who is he? Because we dealt with the Spaniards coming from the south up through Mexico. We dealt with Coronado and Oñate and all of them. We didn't really hear much about Christopher Columbus and everything, and then to find out that he was Italian and not Spanish, even though he came across the ocean there after convincing the king and queen of Spain that that this is something he needed to do. But as you see on that map, he never hit North America. Those were his roots, but they never took him. And so it's kind of like, why are we celebrating somebody and saying that he discovered America when he didn't? And so educationally, to me, that doesn't make sense. But you can go there and read more about it. The ushistory.com has a lot of information on everything. So that's a good place to go to. When were American tribes given American citizenship? As early as 1817, it was given. But in 1924, Congress extended American citizenship to all other American Indians born within the territorial limits of the United States. American Indians and Alaskan Natives are citizens of the United States and of the individual states, counties, cities, and towns where they reside. They can also become citizens of their tribes, villages, or enrolled tribal members. Now, you know, there was something that I was reading about when the soldiers were going to war in World War I, like stated up above. They were kind of given an option that if they signed up and fought, that they could get citizenship during that time earlier than everybody else did. And so I don't know how many of the Native men even knew about it, and how many of them actually did that. Because when you hear about some of the men that did go to war in World War I, many of them were talking about, I was a soldier and not even a citizen of the United States. So apparently some of those people didn't know about it. And then about when did we have an opportunity to vote? People were allowed to vote already, but the Native people really didn't get the vote until an act called the Snyder Act was admitted, and then they said we could vote. But just because it was said that in 1924, a lot of tribes didn't get to vote because it was up to the states. And so if the states didn't allow the Native American people in their state to vote, then they didn't vote. And so there were several states that held out to the very end that didn't allow the Native Americans to have a vote in their state. And so, you know, these are just some of the contributions that I had mentioned earlier: people of agriculture, astronomers, engineers, scientists, mathematicians, educators, doctors, surgeons, leaders, economists, they had spiritual systems like clanships, social structures, to name a few. So now I'm going to ask, we can talk about story, but to me and to a lot of the people that I come from, things are just more than a story. You know, here I wrote down, storytelling was used for centuries to chronicle life, history, and culture. Before the printing press, oral histories were the only way people kept traditions, history, values, and their way of life from dying out. We have come full circle by using storytelling again to stimulate the imagination of adults and children and give them a bank account from which to draw from. This painting was done by a man here in Amarillo. His name is Kirk Richards, and he's a great artist. And he contacted me one day to ask me if I ever did modeling for artists. And I said, you know, in college, I remembered some women had art classes and they would ask me to sit. I said, that's the only thing. So he started to use me as his subject. And he told me that I could use the picture that he had drawn. I don't remember which people it went to. He was doing it for a person. And so I decided to go ahead and use it to kind of come towards an end. At the bottom of it, this is some Tewa words. Wigiwe pi kwandi. We are here for some purpose. Nadi I kwando. What are you going to take with you during your lifetime? My aunt, Dextra Kotskovi, she was telling me about these words. She said when she was growing up, my Saya Nempeyu and other of her elders, those were the things that they would ask them every time. Do you know what your purpose is? And she told me before she passed away, she said, you know, Drina, some people think that we're just here to enjoy ourselves and to have fun, but we're actually here for a reason, for a purpose. And she said, did you find your purpose of why you were brought here? And I said, yes, and I think I have. And she says, okay. She says, well, you stick with it and you keep on doing it and you do a good job. And I take what I do very seriously, and I call myself a traveling educator. And I love creating, and I love meeting new people. And I hope that whenever you go throughout your day and your year, that you realize that you too have a wonderful purpose in life, and that you can share that with other people as you go about your days. But anyway, I think we're coming to an end, Emily. So if we want to, I'll go ahead and stop share, and then we can get together and answer any questions that you might have. Hello?
Perfect, perfect, perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We should have a mic, and then for those of y'all on Zoom, if you'll use the raise hand feature. I'm trying to share screen briefly, real quick, so that we can have our eval up. So.
I know I gave you guys a lot of information, and I was telling Emily I had to go back and kind of take a lot away because I knew I was going to overload you anyway. So feel free to ask me, and I'll try to answer the best I can to anybody that might have any questions.
And if you don't want to say your question out loud, you're also welcome. Okay, awesome. There's questions live in the room. Do you want to put them on the mic, Turbo? Perfect.
Hi. So my question is, in an ever increasing environment where I feel like our identities are allowed to where we can assert ourselves and actually define who we want to be, with our pronouns, or even by defining ourselves by our name and standing up and correcting people in the moment. Do you ever introduce yourself by your tribal name?
Yes. Yes, usually wherever I go, I will, especially if I speak in a crowd. And one of the things, my name, Eldrena Douma, Douma is actually pronounced Dauma, and it's a Hopi word, and it means singing as you go. That was the name of my grandfather. And so my grandmother sat me down one day, my Saya, and who was married to him, and said, Drina, I'm going to tell you something. Do you know what your name Douma? Do you know what it means? And I said, no, Saya, I don't. I just know it comes from Grandpa. And she said, yes, your grandpa, before he went to boarding school, his name was Dauma. That was the name that was given to his aunt. And when he went to school, they told him that he could no longer just use that as his name, that he would have to have an English name, and they were going to give him the name Douglas. And he asked them, what does Douglas mean? And they said, we don't know. It's just a name. And he said to his family afterwards, he said, I thought that was very strange that these people just give away names and they have no They don't have any knowledge of what the name means. They gave him the name Singing As You Go because he was always singing whenever he would come down the trails from the top of the mesa down to his garden. And so his aunts, when it was time to give him his name, they gave him Douma, Singing As You Go. But once again, the boarding school couldn't pronounce that, so they went ahead and changed that, and they changed it to Douglas Douma. And so because I know the rest of the story, that's the story I pass on to all of the Douma children. And I use Douma because it has a story. My husband's name, the name that I received when I got married is MacMinamy. And so I was sitting behind a group of Comanche women when I was asked to do some storytelling among their gathering. And they were trying to pronounce my last name, and they were butchering it up, and I was just laughing behind them. And they said, I wonder what kind of Indian this one is. And they were stumbling, and I was laughing. So when I got up, I went ahead and introduced myself, and the ladies got embarrassed because they knew I was sitting behind them. But after that, I came home and I asked my husband, I said, this is not meant to offend you or your family. I said, but I was wondering that as I go about this world, if I could go ahead, if you don't mind if I use my name, my maiden name, Douma, because it has a story. And your family never learned anything about yourselves. So you don't know what your name means. And I know what my name means. So then he said, yeah, that's okay. It would not bother me. And so I asked permission from my in-laws too, because I did not want to offend them. And they said that was fine. So when I tell stories, I go by Eldrena Douma. So that's kind of how I stay true to who I am and the people that I come from. But I also use my name Kuunutsawe too. I tell the children, if you call me Blue Corn, I will know that you were sitting in the audience when I was telling a story, because I don't tell everybody my my Tewa name, just the ones that were there when I told stories. I don't know if that answered anything.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. We've got a couple more questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
There we go. I had one question that I had was, do you think that Native American history is much more, I guess, subdued in a way that we don't necessarily know much about it, and we're not taught about it in our history classes on all levels, really. And it's one of those things that when we are exposed to like the reality of what the many tribes and Native American people did go through, it's sort of a shock because we were always taught, it's very surface level. We know a couple of the tribe's names and things of that sort, but nothing of the culture or anything of that sort. So do you think that history should be resurfaced and actually taught on, like, from kindergarten all the way up through junior high, middle school, and high school, and all the way through college as well?
Yes. And, I think, I don't know if I was telling this to you, Emily. I've talked to many different people that I've presented things to, but one of the things that I remembered growing up is that a lot of times we as the youth would want to rise up and just power our way through things and demand stuff and all that kind of stuff. And we had our grandmas and our grandpas that saw it, and they'd say, well, just hold on now, you have, what you're saying is good, but we've always been a prayerful people. So that's one of the things that they would always remind us every day when you wake up, go and take your cornmeal and go pray for the world, Pray for the leadership of the world. Pray for your country. Pray for the United States. Pray for the states. Pray for your community. Pray for your family. And then last, you pray for yourself. And so those are the things that we were always taught. And so we realized that time sometimes is the strongest thing that we have, because people have to have ears ready to hear and eyes ready to see. And if they're not ready for it, it can overwhelm them to the point where it shuts everything down. They close their ears, they close their eyes, they don't want to hear, they don't want to see, they don't want to know, even though it's truth. And they claim to be educated people. Sometimes we don't want to know everything because we like it that way. But I think that, yes, we are starting to learn that, and like I said, I am a student too. I did not know everything that I know today when I came out of high school. Even though I was Native American, I did not know all the different tribes that were here in the United States. I knew of the Plains tribes. I knew of the Eastern tribes, the ones that greeted the Pilgrims, you know, that type of thing. And then now I've learned the true story of Thanksgiving. So every day I'm learning about more tribes all around me. And whenever I gain that knowledge, I get excited because they have something wonderful to offer to the world and to the communities and to the children. And so when I have that new knowledge, I always want to just pass it on. And that's why I couldn't stop there. There's a whole lot. There's more books that I could have put on that reference page, but there's, you know, I had to stop somewhere. And one of them, when you read some of these books, you got to prepare your mind, because some of this knowledge that you're going to be reading about is going to get you a little bit upset. It's going to get you a little bit angry, but use that for good. Don't use it to attack or to point the finger or to do anything negative. Use it for good. We're becoming literate people with knowledge that we did not have yesterday or this morning or a few hours ago. You just gained some knowledge that you didn't have before. And so I want you to soak it in, think about it, and then and share. But I've given you some really good internet places to go that, I mean, you could sit there and just do things all day. But then one of them is, let me see, where is it? Okay, by James Lowen, Lies My Teacher Told Me, Everything Your American History Textbook Got Wrong. That touches a little bit on the American Indian history, but it talks on a lot of other things in our history. And if you read the very beginning, it'll say something, let me see. At the very beginning of it, kind of at the, it says, kind of like the introduction. Something has gone very wrong. Number one, handicapped by history, the process of hero making. You know, those first things are, you know, and then go to the very bottom, the very bottom of that end of the book. And read a little bit about why history was written the way it was. There actually was a plan. And so you can gain knowledge, not just for the American Indian part of it, but just for history altogether. And when you equip yourself with that, then the way you receive new knowledge is not just like a sheep. You're going to receive new knowledge and you're going to say, that sounds good. Now let me go see where I can research that. And that was kind of what I've done from the time I left high school. My journey has always been to gain new knowledge. And I love being a student. If I could have stayed at the university level and just taken all these courses, I would have. Some I would have stayed away from because I knew I wouldn't do well in those. But I think coming up here, you will see that there is going to be some changes taking place. If not in your communities right now, in Indian country, there's going to be a lot of changes going on. And here in Texas, if you go to a Facebook page called the American Indian Heritage Day, they are constantly letting people know here in Texas what kind of events are taking place and what kind of speakers that they're going to be doing live things with. And a lot of people don't know about the tribes that are here in Texas. So those nations are going to be reaching out to the public communities and school systems to let them know that, that they're available if anybody is needing them to come and speak to them.
Did we have one more face-to-face? And I promise y'all who are in the room, in the ballroom, I have a digital link for that book reference list that Eldrena put together. It's sitting in the chat, but I'm happy to send it to y'all as well. It's a fantastic document. She's done an extensive amount of research and it's great reference list.
So the last question here is rather a comment, and it comes from me to Brazilians. So we are from Mexico, and my great-grandfather and grandfather claimed native identity to the Cora people, which is in Mezquital, Durango. So it's a very small group in there. And one of the things that I found very comforting throughout the presentation was one of the slides where you included the importance of storytelling in the way that they chronicle our history and also like contribute to our identity, because that is how both my great-grandfather and my grandfather were able to pass a lot of the history from our family. And my father has inherited like a really good skill of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it very comforting. So there was something that it was very special for me to have witnessed. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
So thank you. Yes, whenever there's gathering that takes place here in the United States with Native communities, they always include our brothers and sisters to the north, the First Nation people, and then the indigenous ones in Mexico, because what the conquistadors tried to do to the Pueblos back in the 1600s, they already did down to a lot of the indigenous people in Mexico. A lot of the civilizations, the great civilizations that were there, were taken and destroyed and taken over because they did not have the weapons that the Spaniards brought with them when they crossed over the oceans. And many a times in their journaling, they would record how easy it was going to be to take over certain groups of people because they did not have that knowledge of what a sword was or the metal part of it. And then when they came to the Pueblo people, they were trying to get them to, get rid of their language and get rid of their traditional ways, their ceremonies, the traditions, the dances, everything like that. And that's kind of what provoked the people in Popé to do what they did as far as to do a revolt. And Popé is the only one on American soil that is credited. Popé and the warriors were the only ones that were credited to take down a superpower here on American soil. No one else has ever done that before. And so all of the indigenous ones down in Mexico, several of them have kept their language. And every now and then I will come across someone that will speak to me in their native language that come from the country of Mexico. And it gets me so excited because it's like, you don't understand. That's an ancient language. That's an ancient language. And for somebody in your family to hold it so dear that, that they continue to speak it and know it so well to pass it on, it's better than gold, because gold will come and go, but your language is a gift that everybody was given, whether it's your English language, Asian language, you know, what European languages that are all over the place. These are gifts. Our language is the gifts that we were given. And they are beautiful when they're spoken. They're beautiful. And when the songs are sung and everything, oh, it's just, I value that. I value that in everybody. That's why a lot of times it hurts me that when a lot of the immigrants came to the United States, that a lot of them didn't keep the language that they came with. And so many of their descendants, they don't know the language that that their forefathers and their ancestors came to this country with. They don't know it. They don't know who they are. They don't know where they came from. They don't know what their names mean. And they don't have that language. And so it's very important to me for people to keep that alive. And so I hope that whenever anybody comes up from the country of Mexico, if you have a language that is different than the Spanish, what the conquistadors brought from their country, Spain, and basically they kind of told that they had to take that language on economy-wise, but also back then they were also threatened to give up their mother language and to go with Spanish speaking. And so that was kind of what was being done to us among the Pueblo people. But we thought, no, that's not our language. You know, we have our mother language. And now we can learn Spanish, because my dad, he learned Spanish and Hopi and Tewa and English and a little bit of Navajo, because those were the people around him. And so he was very proud to use it whenever he could. He's not here anymore, but the Pueblo people, they were very, they learned all the languages of the people that surrounded them, because they had to do business with them, whether it was, you know, selling livestock or their crops from their fields. They had to do business with people around them, so they learned each other's languages. So I guess it was kind of a thing that you do when you're trading with people. But thank you, I really appreciate that.
I'm just going to invite folks to share if they have anything in the chat. I do see one comment saying that the people are very strong and visible in New Mexico and Arizona, questioning why is there not a strong presence in Texas? I'm not sure if is that a rhetorical question, Bill, or is that a serious inquiry? Is that a serious question, or is it rhetorical? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure because there wasn't a question mark. I just wanted to be clear. It's a serious question, and I didn't mean that in any disrespectful way. It could have been an observation about why. Oh, lament. You know, I apologize. So yeah. So why isn't there a more strong and developed presence in Texas?
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of the tribes that flowed through here, some of them, the ancient ones, some of them got absorbed into other tribes. And so they no longer carry the name that we once knew them as. Here in Texas, they had to battle. There were several leaders in Texas that welcomed the Native people that were already in the state of Texas. They welcomed them, and they moved around them, you know, as if they were all friends almost. And then some leadership came in and they wanted them all out. It didn't matter if they lived there for a long time, they wanted them out. But that was happening across the country anyway. And so some of the tribes that were once here, they might have moved to other places or they got absorbed into other groups. And like the ones that we have here, like the Alabama Coshada and the Kickapoo, the Ysleta del Sur that's outside of El Paso, they came from the Pueblo Revolt days. And then you can find the Kickapoo up in the Oklahoma area too and other places. But the Lipan Apaches are here also. I can't remember if they just recently got federally recognized. I don't remember, but I think they are state recognized. So here in Texas, you have some that are federally recognized and some that are only recognized by state. They're not recognized federally. And so you can go on the website also and find out. And each one of the nations that are here in Texas, they have websites that you can get more information, like the Ysleta del Sur, the Alabama Coshada, they have the Kickapoos, they have websites up that you can learn more about them and learn where their territory was. I just recently heard a great speaker from the Caddo Nation. The Caddos were here in Texas, and they were a very peaceful people, but they were attacked and massacred. There were many massacres around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, all the way a little bit further to the west. And if you ever go to the Caddo Nation website, they may discuss it and maybe even have maps on there about it. But there's also rivers that are here in Texas that their original indigenous names were done away with and replaced by other names that really they don't have that same meaning as the name that the indigenous ones gave to the lakes and the rivers. And they don't just, you have to understand that sometimes in this world, people, sometimes they don't just give a name. There's a reason why that name is given to them. So anyway, just kind of look it up. And here in Texas, I think just recently, I've noticed that there's a lot more things happening in among the Indian groups that are here in Texas. We have organizations in the Dallas area, Austin, San Antonio, Houston. Sometimes they fluctuate, sometimes they get big, and sometimes they're small. But there's always people from all over the country that are moving to the big cities because of jobs. And when they're here, they get lonesome, just like me. They get lonesome, and we're looking for each other. And so when we discover one another, it's almost like a breath of fresh air, a little bit of home away from home, even though they don't come from the tribe that we come from. There's that laughter, there's that camaraderie, there's that food, there's that music, there's that story. All of those things we're comfortable with wherever we come from. And so that makes it a little bit easier to be away from the people that I grew up with. And so anyway, hopefully that'll help you guys to get out there. There's some great things that are going on here in Texas also, great speakers and stuff that are out there, artists, some great groups out there. So just kind of keep your ears and eyes open. You can go to the Texas Commission on the Arts. The Texas Commission on the Arts has groups on there. I know there's a dance troupe. I think they come from the Alabama Coshada people. And then I don't remember I can't remember if they have Aztec dancers on there or not. I don't remember now, but check that out too. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I would have loved to have been there. Virtually, it's a little bit harder to look into this little eye here and kind of try to see beyond it.
Well, we certainly appreciate you, and Bill sends his thanks to you, addressing you as Blue Corn. I know that you're probably not opening your chat right now because that's not as easy to do when you're in presenter mode.
Yes.
Been there, done that. Yes, yes, yes. Are there any last minute questions for Eldrena? I greatly appreciate her taking the time to speak to us today. I have gained a lot in my conversations with her, and it's been a very enlightening experience. Let me check this chat one more time. So Tiburcio is very grateful for your time with us. We're very lucky. Tarleton's very lucky. If y'all share Turbo's experience and opinion, share that feedback through the evaluation so that I can pass it on to our lovely, oops, this is the wrong one. Gosh, help if I have you on the right QR code. This is the correct QR code. So that I can pass it on to Eldrena, let her know what the comments are, and so that we can, bring back more presentations and programs like this. And of course, if you want to see all of the reference material and you're not in the Zoom chat, go ahead and send an email to vankirk@tarleton.edu. I'll put that in the chat. Or you can email diversity@tarleton.edu because that's a lot easier to remember. And just give another round of applause with the host in the ballroom unmute.
Thank you.
Applaud.
One more thing, Emily, I forgot. One of the things that the group out of Dallas really worked hard on was to get a House bill passed in the state of Texas, and they got it passed. I don't remember the year. I don't have the information in front of me, but what was passed was that the state of Texas would celebrate the American Indians that are living in the state of Texas, and all of the tribes that once were on the last Friday in September. From that point on, if you have never heard of that, it is a bill that was passed in our state legislature that from this day forward or that day forward, the last Friday in September would be the day designated to celebrate the American Indians here, especially in Texas.
That's fantastic. Thank you for dropping that piece of knowledge. But yes, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you.
Yes.
And please share that feedback so that we can share that with her. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Oh.
Okay, are we done?
We're done whenever you are, dear.